The subsequent rise of COVID cases in China, Japan, United States has triggered a wave of panic in India, understandably so. Plenty of questions on people's minds whether the existing vaccines will work, whether it is the good time to take booster dose if you have surpassed the 6-month window, and what are the necessary precautions that you need to take. To answer these questions, I am being joined by Dr. Nageshwar Reddy. So thank you so much. It's always a pleasure speaking to you on CNN News 18. Is there a cause of concern and worry for India?
Prima facie, I think there's nothing to worry about. We don't have to go into a panic situation like what happened last year with the Delta virus, but still there is some concern which we should address very carefully, because this BF17 which is there in China and is causing a lot of havoc may not do the same in India, because it has actually entered India in October but hasn't spread as much. It's predominantly XBB that we have in our country. So we need not panic, but I think we should also be concerned and take certain precautionary measures.
So how is this BF7 different from the other Delta variants that we have seen?
So BF7 is more transmissible. It's 10 to 18 times more transmissible than other Omicron viruses that are seen. Although in terms of virulence, that is attacking the lungs and all, it's again not very high. It's still limited to the upper respiratory tract. So that way it's safer.
Talking about the vaccination, you've done a very interesting study. In fact, it's called heterologous. In fact, mixing of corbevax with those who've taken covishield. Corbevax as a booster dose. What does the study reveal?
So our hypothesis was that if you use a different type of vaccine for the booster or the precautionary dose, then the immune response may be better. We started this hypothesis, and then we took two groups of people. One group had covishield first, second and third dose. This is homologous. The second group had covishield first and second dose as advocated by the government, and the third dose was a booster which we gave corbevax, which is the peptide vaccine. In I think May, June this year, government has allowed corbevax to be given as a booster vaccine. So we wanted to test the hypothesis to see what is the response if we give a different type of vaccine as a booster or precautionary. And to our surprise, what we found was that those people who took corbevax or peptide vaccine as a heterologous vaccine had a much higher antibody response, had a much higher T-cell memory response, which indicates that their memory lasted longer. And more importantly, 6 months follow-up of these patients people showed that the infection rates are much lower, and all those about 3-4% developed infections was very, very mild asymptomatic. So these are lessons to suggest that if you take a heterologous vaccine, especially a peptide-based vaccine, not only are the side effects less with this vaccine, but your immunological reaction may be better. And this paper was published in Vaccine just 3 days back.
Sir, I also remember that a couple of months ago, you had also suggested and done a study which is published in ICJ, that mixture of covishield and covaxin is also as effective. So going by the current scenario, will the current bunch of vaccines that we have, predominantly covishield, covaxin, along with corbevax, will that be effective in fighting Omicron and the subvariants that we are seeing in India?
Yeah, I believe that that is so. In fact, our hypothesis has always been that we mix different types of vaccine in a mix and match study, which we published earlier, showed a higher response with mix and match than using the same vaccine, because the body develops certain amount of immunotolerance to the same vaccine. So this is gone. In fact, our study was confirmed also by CMC Vellore study, which was published later on, which showed the same phenomena. So we believe that if you give a different type, for example, from inactivated virus, you are now giving adenovector, or if you are giving a peptide vaccine, the response is much higher. So this is the basic immunological principles that one can follow.
Sir, I also want to go back to my earlier question. Very interestingly, I was part of your press conference where you said how the current wave of pandemic that we are seeing in China is not going to be the same in India. You cited 3 different reasons. If you could tell us that.
Yeah, I think the reason why this Chinese endemicity is so high and then having this wave there was for 3 reasons. One is, of course, the Chinese vaccine which initially came, the efficacy was of doubtful value. We still don't know how effective it was. People say it was up to 40% efficacy only. Secondly, they didn't go to the whole vulnerable population. 70% of vulnerable population in China was not vaccinated, so that left a big gap. And third most important was, with the zero COVID policy, the immunity didn't develop as a herd immunity in the rest of the population. So suddenly you expose this large population group to a virus which is, they don't have immunity, and because they have not been adequately vaccinated, this virus is producing the rampage. But compared to this, in India, our vaccination program has been extremely effective. I think the government has done a very good job in this. Our antibody levels in general population is much higher than what is seen in the Chinese population, and we've been able to reach much larger vulnerable population group. For all these reasons, we would not have a same wave that is seen in China. Okay. This is for sure. But even that small percentage of protection, we should now start acting very aggressively with this precautionary or booster dose, which again the government is advocating. And of course, in very crowded areas, still masking up for the next 1 or 2 months would be important.
So, while India seems to be in safe space compared to the rest of the country, rest of the world, cause of concern is that 30% of our population has only taken booster dose. Yes, yes. So at large, there is massive exposure. So what does one do if they have crossed the 6-month window period? Because people have been laxity has seeped in, considering that COVID was disappeared or had disappeared some months ago.
So I think again this is a very important point. Only 28% of our population has really taken this booster or precautionary dose. 72% are now vulnerable, but of course we still have some basic immunity, antibodies, memory cells and so on that will partially protect us. But we should not have laxity here. I would suggest that all of us, now that we have the capability to get these vaccines so easily, should take the precautionary or booster dose 6 months after the previous one. And I believe that we should make it an yearly vaccination program for next 2 or 3 years till this virus persists. This is very important, so that even the small 5% chance of getting this infection goes off.
So you're saying that COVID vaccine should be part of the regular immunization process?
Yeah, I think for the next 2 or 3 years at least, COVID vaccine should be like influenza vaccine or flu vaccine that we take. In fact, we are hoping that it will be mixed with the influenza vaccines, so they come together as a combined vaccine, so it becomes easy for public to take it.
The panic has certainly gripped amongst the public, and there are a lot of notions that are being floated. The recent one that I studied on the internet was that vaccines are leading to heart attacks, side effects, different kinds of diseases. Myth clearly, and how will you dispel that?
So there is a lot of misconceptions about the vaccine. Certainly with the mRNA vaccine that was used in the West, and to some extent with adenovector vaccine, we did see a certain amount of vasculitis, vascular injuries. Some people had cardiac events and so on. Very small percentage, and of course we now know why these events occurred. There have been several very good studies to actually show the pathway of these events. But fortunately for us, with the peptide vaccine, this does not occur. We have not seen this, and it's unlikely to occur also, because we know peptide vaccines are very safe in that sense. So I think public should now realize that there's no harm, that there's no dangers in taking the vaccine, especially those that are available in our country. They're extremely safe. And in the study that we did, we found that not a single patient who had taken this peptide vaccine developed any side effects.
Last, before I let you go, sir, your word of caution and advice to the general public, so that it's time that they start practicing COVID appropriate behavior.
I think for at least next few months, I would suggest that first of all, everybody should take this booster or precautionary dose, because within 2 weeks you'll start getting protected. Secondly, masking, especially for those who have diabetes or elderlies and so on, and if you're going to crowded places, kindly start using the masks. And third is a little social distancing. This would be very important, and I'm sure that next 2 or 3 months are the periods which are going to be important. After that, this virus again will start going off.
Thank you so much. So you've heard the main voice in this country, one of the most respected voices in fact, saying that booster dose is your protection to keep yourself and your family safe in the wake of the panic that we are seeing and the subsequent rise that we may see as far as COVID cases are concerned. Nothing to worry, but remember, precaution is your best arsenal. With video journalist Venkatesh, Swastika Das for CNN News 18 from Hyderabad.